Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 29 of the 2023 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects to get you ready for the NFL draft, which is just 10 days away. That's right, Thursday, April 27th, Kansas City, Missouri. I can't wait. Really, when you look at this now, the franchises all have their draft boards set. That'll ultimately dictate what they want to do on draft night. Do they trade up? Do they trade down? Do they stay put? Really, what's going to happen? A lot of that's going to play out, obviously, all 3 days of the draft. The first round really gets all of the hype, gets all of the, it's on prime time there on Thursday. But obviously, all 3 days of the draft are going to matter. The teams that are able to draft not only on day 1, but 2 and 3 are the teams that ultimately, we're seeing in the playoffs. You look at Seattle, they hit a home run with all 3 days of the draft, and you see what it did for them. That was an organization where we weren't really sure what we were going to get out of Seattle. And what do? They wind up making their way to the playoffs. And obviously, Geno Smith had a career year. That's really part of the fun. Really getting to see what those draft boards look like, seeing who they're targeting and when. And really what I'm trying to do with these positional rankings is try to identify really who the players are that are going to be coming off the board in each round of the draft. And I think really when we're talking about these rounds, you're really looking at it in tiers, right? Beyond when you get past the third round, when you're talking about day 3, who are the guys going to be, 4th, 5th round, 5th, 6th, 6th, 7th, possibly 7th, or undrafted free agent. That's really kind of how you have to look at it, because once you get into day 3, kind of all bets are off in terms of really trying to forecast it, because there is a lot of movement. A lot of teams are really looking at what's going to be their best fit, and so it's really hard to predict exactly where these guys are going to go, but we're going to try to do it anyway. This is the first positional ranking for the defensive side of the football leading up to the draft. And I really tried to start it a couple of weeks ago talking about quarterbacks. We went through the entire offense. Now we're talking about the edge rushers. And obviously, this is where we have the money makers, right? The guys at the top of the draft. But you're also going to be taking a look at guys who can still get after the quarterback that you're going to want to take a look at on days 2 and 3 of the draft. This is a really deep edge rush draft class. And I think that's what makes it so exciting. Now, when we look at it, obviously we're going to have some guys that are going to be outside linebackers and defensive ends, so it's kind of hard to go back and take a look at the edge rush per se. But what we can do is at least look at the defensive ends and kind of talk through what we see there, and take a look at the linebackers and see who might else fit into these groups. So back in 2018, we had 22 defensive ends taken. When you think about that, Bradley Chubb, Marcus Davenport were the only 2 that came off the board in round 1. Harold Landry, Tyquan Lewis, Lorenzo Carter all have made an impression for their teams. They were all taken on day 2. Sam Hubbard falls to number 77 overall. We know the impact he's made for the Bengals. Rasheem Green, Arden Key have been nice veterans. Dorrance Armstrong has been a nice backup for the Cowboys. He came off the board in round 4. Josh Sweat, 130 overall. Seriously, going there to the Eagles. Ogbo Okoronkwo, he was drafted by the Rams, went to the Texans. Now he's with the Browns. He's looking to pair up with Myles Garrett. So really, as we're doing this, and I should back up and really explain the fact that, in order to go forward, we've got to really take a look at what's happened in the past. And when we talk about the past, we want to, at least see where we've been to kind of predict what the draft class is going to look like here for 2023. So if we take a look at the outside linebackers who can be considered edge rushers, and Uchenna Nwosu came off the board number 48 overall to the Chargers. He's there with Seattle now. He's entering a contract year. You're expecting some big things out of him there. I think that's really what you're going to see there 2018-wise. 2019, obviously we know Josh Allen to the Jaguars, coming out of Kentucky, number 7 overall. Really made a big impact. Brian Burns, number 16 overall as well, going to the Panthers. These guys were kind of slated as outside linebackers coming into the draft. We know in the case of Brian Burns, he's really been that defensive end. Chase Winovich, an edge, round number 3, number 77 overall. He's a guy that's been a nice role player, and I think really when you look at the linebacker position, 2019, that's about what you're looking for with that group. When you transition to the defensive ends, This was the year, obviously, Nick Bosa came off the board, number 2 overall. Cleveland Ferrell, really a disappointment there. Mike Mayock trying to go with the Clemson Tiger, ultimately been really a bust for a number 4 overall pick. Rashawn Gary has battled some injuries, but 12 overall. When he's healthy, he looks like he can be dominant. Montez Sweat was a steal there at number 26 overall to the Redskins coming out of Mississippi State. LJ Collier just really didn't pan out for Seattle. He was the other guy taken in round number 1 there, number 29 overall. Zach Allen has been a nice pick there for the Cardinals. First pick in round number 3, number 65 overall. He's now with the Denver Broncos. Max Crosby. Holy cow. How in the world did he fall to the 4th round? 106 overall, coming out of Eastern Michigan. We've got a guy coming out of Eastern Michigan that's going to be an edge rusher in this year's draft as well. John Kaminsky, 4th round, coming out of Charleston. Small school. We've got a guy coming out of Ferris State this year that we're going to be talking about that could come off the board right around that same range. Charles Omena, who has been a nice role player, came off the board there in round number 5 in 2019. 2020, just 2 edge rushers taken in round 1, which is crazy, at least from the defensive end position. You're talking Chase Young, you're talking Clavin Chason. Chason really hasn't panned out. Chase Young's been battling injuries. Yetur Gross-Matos coming off in round number 2. Darrell Taylor to the Seattle Seahawks. He's been able to produce a little bit. AJ Epinesa there for the Bills. He's been a nice role player. A lot of these guys are going to be role players. Alex Highsmith, round 3, 102 overall. We know the impact that he's made there with the Steelers, especially when TJ Watt went down. Alton Robinson, round 5 to the Seahawks. He's been a nice find there. How about Michael Dana there for the Chiefs, falling all the way to round number 5, number 177 overall. We know he started his career there at Central Michigan, transferred to the University of Michigan, and was a guy that, he just looked the part. It was just one of those things to where he didn't get a ton of reps, but, he's been a nice rotational piece. If we look at the linebacker position, we go through it. Josh Uche came off the board in the 2nd round, number 60 overall. He just hasn't really shown the explosiveness that you're really expecting from him. Zach Bond, the Saints, he's finally starting to get some playing time. 3rd round, number 74 overall. So this was a draft really, not a ton of depth there really at the top of the draft. More depth there really in the middle more than anything else. You look at 2021, we had 28 edge rushers taken. This is where Jalen Phillips came off the board, number 18 overall, and then really we kind of had a run, right? 21 was Kwity Paye, 28 Peyton Turner, hasn't really panned out. 30 overall, Gregory Rousseau. This is the year that the Bills decided to go back-to-back in terms of their defensive ends, doubling up with Carlos Basham, Boogie Basham there, number 61 overall. 7 picks before that was Dayo Adegbo. Even with the knee injury, he still came off the board in the 2nd round. Joseph Osai, we know what happened there in the playoffs, the late hit on Patrick Mahomes. He was a 3rd round pick. Ronnie Perkins, really, coming out of OU, expecting big things, just hasn't really been able to see the field a ton there with the Patriots. Cam Sample out of Tulane, raw, but definitely talented there with the Bengals. Rashad Weaver has shown some promise with the Titans. He was also a 4th round pick. So this was a draft class, again, an interesting group. Nobody's really separated themselves, really had a breakout. I think if there's anyone, it might be Jalen Phillips, although we haven't seen him quite fulfill his potential just yet. Moving to the linebackers, we take a look at that group. Obviously, Micah Parsons is the guy that you have to talk about, right? Number 12 overall, bit explosive, whether it's at defensive end, as a linebacker. The guy just knows how to get home, how to get after the quarterback. Odafe Owe, 31 overall to the Ravens, kind of up and down. We knew that he was going to be a little raw. Joe Tryon Joyinka coming off the board to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, number 32 overall. Really another guy who kind of up and down. You're expecting a little bit more out of him. Hopefully, he can make the transition this year and really start stepping his game up a little bit. Azeez Ojulari has been a nice find for the Giants at number 50 overall. Really good value getting him there. Baron Browning You want to see a little bit more out of him, in terms of being an edge. He's more of a linebacker, really. 105 overall there to the Broncos. So that's really your edge group at both linebacker and defensive end in 2021. And then if you look at 2022 defensive ends, we had 19. So really kind of a down year in terms of the overall depth. But obviously at the top of the draft, we know what happened. Trayvon Walker, Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, 1, 2, and 5 to the Jags, Lions, and Giants respectively. Jets able to get back into round number 1, 26 overall to get Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State. George Karlaftis at the end of round number 1. Josh Paschal, look, he's battled back from some injuries. Looks like, he's going to be a nice find there for the Lions in round number 2. Same goes for the Cowboys with Sam Williams coming out of Mississippi, also a second-round pick. Jury's still going to be out on guys like Alex Wright, Cameron Thomas, Myjai Sanders, all coming off the board in round number 3. JJ Adebawore is another guy for the Packers, 5th-round pick, a guy that I think they're really going to start leaning on, especially if Rashawn Gary, who tore his ACL in November, can't go at the start of the season. Adebawore is going to be a guy that they're really going to be looking to. If you look at the guys that are considered linebackers, at least entering the draft, Arnold Ebiketie, want to see him have a more expanded role under Ryan Nielsen there with the Falcons taking in round number 2, 38 overall. 2 picks later was Boye Mafe to Seattle, and he's another guy that showed some promise. David Ojabo for the Ravens, 45 overall, and then Drake Jackson going to the 49ers, number 61 overall. Drake Jackson, I think, has that potential to be a breakout here in 2023. Nick Bonito to the Broncos, number 64 overall, another edge rusher. D'Angelo Malone, a guy that was highly productive for Western Kentucky, came off the board in round number 3. I think a lot of people were thinking he was a little undersized, still able to come off the board in round 3 despite all of that. So that's one of the things. A lot of people had him ranked a little bit lower, but we see what the production was able to do for him. In round 6, the Lions get a steal, James Houston IV, edge rusher extraordinaire. I mean, between he and Aiden Hutchinson, I think they tallied over 17 sacks between the two of them. And even though he's lining up at linebacker, this is a dude that knows how to get home coming off the edge. Really a lot of fun to watch. So who's going to be this year's James Houston? That's really what we're wanting to find out as we go through this draft class. So let's go ahead and jump right into things in terms of my rankings, where I see everything kind of playing out. When you look at Will Anderson Jr., this is a dude who's going to be your elite edge rusher in this year's draft class. A guy that I think ultimately the Texans, if they don't get Bryce Young, they may not be satisfied with getting CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. And you've got a defensive-minded head coach in D'Amico Ryans. Get your edge rusher, and then if you want to get a quarterback, you've got the 12th pick. You could always move back up into the top 10 to get your quarterback, or potentially even stay put at 12 and get your guy. But Will Anderson Jr., just turn on the 2021 tape, how dominant he was. This was a guy coming off the edge, 31 tackles for loss, 17.5 sacks, but the dude also, as an edge rusher, had 101 tackles. Heat-seeking missile, flying around to the football. In 2022, everyone was expecting him to elevate the game even further. Still had 51 tackles, 17 for loss, 10 sacks, and everyone was talking about just what a down year it was for him. It took him a little ways to get going before he finally got his first sack, but man, let's not get it twisted. This is a guy, his get-off is elite, has a knack for flipping his hips in a hurry, attacking the hands, flattens out, gets the edge, plays at his best, I think, when he's wide, which allows him to use that length to his advantage, puts stress on the offensive tackle to the outside, also allows him to attack the inside in a hurry, a wide array of pass rush moves, relentless in pursuit of the football, can also set a strong edge against the run, and uses his length to quickly stack and shed and make a play on the football. But he's not invincible. Turn on that Tennessee tape, watch Darnell Wright, gave him problems with his length and power. There is some stiffness to him that can limit some of his bend. But look, this guy's a game wrecker. There's no doubt about it. If I'm D'Amico Ryans and I'm not sold on any of these other quarterbacks, if the Panthers don't go, or if the Panthers go with Bryce Young, my pick should end up being Will Anderson Jr., and then I'm looking to see if I can trade back into the top 10 if I'm worried that the other 3 quarterbacks are going to be coming off the board. Because I don't think you can be settling with Davis Mills and Case Keenum there at that quarterback position. I just don't. Unless they're going to be trading for a quarterback, I just don't see them getting out of this draft without taking one of the top quarterbacks. I just don't think it necessarily has to be at number 2 overall. If you can't get an elite edge rusher and a quarterback, I mean, right then and there, you're talking about almost that should be an A ranking. I don't even care what you do the rest of the draft. If you get the 2 of those guys, that could end up changing your franchise. Number 2 on my list is Tyree Wilson, Texas Tech, 6'6", 271. Look, if Will Anderson does go 2, he's going number 3 overall to the Cardinals. Cardinals need some help there with the pass rush. Tally just 34 sacks, good for 24th in the league. J.J. Watt's retired. Zach Allen's gone. No edge rusher currently on the roster. Have more than 3 sacks. That was Myles Sanders. And if those stats weren't enough, then you got Marcus Golden, who's also being released. And so Tyree Wilson is a guy that has tremendous length. Uses that to his advantage, both against the pass and the run. Dynamic setting the edge as a backside defender, chases down running backs, able to convert that speed to power to attack the edge as a pass rusher. He can attack you in a number of ways, from a 2-point stance to a traditional 4-3, kicks inside as the 4-eye to provide an interior rush on obvious passing downs. Really gives Jonathan Gannon and company some options up front. This is a guy, not only did he have the 7 sacks in 2022, but 50 pressures. This is a guy that, I think, he doesn't have elite bend, but man, the length, the power, the physicality, and just the overall athleticism, you have to be excited there. And if he doesn't, if a quarterback does go number 2 overall, then I think Seattle at 5, the Lions potentially, although I think the Lions are going corner with the trade of Okudah, could go there. And then I don't think he gets past the Falcons there at 8. I think the Raiders would consider him if he's there at 7. And then at 8, I think the Falcons would be a no-brainer with Ryan Nielsen and company there. Next on my list is a guy that they call Hercules there out of Iowa, and that's Lukas Van Nes. 6'5", 272, the junior. Look, I look at Atlanta, 31st in the league in sacks. They're sitting there at number 8. If they miss out on Will Anderson Jr. and Tyree Wilson, I look at Lukas Van Nes, and I would love to see what Ryan Nielsen could do with this guy. And ultimately, if Atlanta goes elsewhere, then I'm looking at the Eagles. Eagles need some pass rush help, especially with Brandon Graham only signing a 1-year deal, 34 years of age. Just do the math. At some point, that production is going to start slipping. You need to start preparing for the future if you're Howie Roseman. But when you look at Lukas Van Nes, the power, I think that's really the thing that jumps off, right? The bull rush, his ability to just manhandle guys. If you put on the Ohio State tape, you're going to watch him just drive Paris Johnson Jr. nearly all the way back to C.J. Stroud, who was nestled right there in the pocket. But the power, you see him, he was able to strike DeJuan Jones, spun him around, works back around to the inside to get to C.J., fell down, got back up, able to drop him for no gain. The speed to power is ridiculous. That's really, I look at my notes and everything is speed to power and being able to drive guys back. Takes on double teams, but he needs to work on the array of pass rush moves. That's really the biggest thing that you see with him. But man, the production is ridiculous. The guy didn't even start. They were starting Joe Evans and John Wagner. And so I think some of the rawness to his game is probably why he wasn't a starter. You look at what he did, though. 19 tackles for loss, 13 sacks, coming off the bench, right? And I used some comparisons to J.J. Watt. Now, look, I'm not saying he's going to be the next J.J. Watt by any means, but you look at it, they're the same height, they have the same length of arm, 34 inches, 6'5", 34-inch arms. J.J. Watt weighed in about 18 pounds heavier. Van Nes ran a 4.71 to Watt's 4.84. Ultimately, the 4.32 short shuttle, 7.023 cone drill, Not on the level of J.J. Watts, who was at a 4.21 and a 6.88 respectively. But the production, look, J.J. had 36.5 tackles for loss and 11.5 sacks in 2 seasons at Wisconsin. And Van Nes off the bench in 19 and 13. It's just the makeup feels very similar. He's a guy that I think can be multiple, just like Ryan Nielsen wants to be. So I think that's really a nice fit there for Atlanta. I think the upside is scary, though, with Lukas Van Nes, what he might be able to accomplish. Next on the list, in terms of edge rushers, I'm looking at Nolan Smith out of Georgia, 6'2", 238. This is a guy that's going to bring a lot of energy. He's fired up all the time. You love that. He's also a leader. You saw that. He tore his pectoral muscle. Sounds familiar. That's what I'm going through right now. Less than 2 weeks away from a doctor visit that's actually on the day of the draft, and hopefully I'll be able to get out of the sling on that day. So draft day is really an exciting day for me in a number of occasions. Plus my brother, it's his birthday as well. So April 27th, let's just have a big party all the way around. But with Nolan Smith, after he suffers the pec tear, you see him on the sideline. He didn't hang his head. He didn't sulk. This was a guy who was coaching up his team, and man, you watch him in the national championship. He was just having a blast on the sideline. So physical at the point of attack. A guy that really does a great job setting the edge. Bends pretty well coming off the edge as well as a pass rusher. He looks a lot like Micah Parsons and Hassan Reddick, and ran that 4.39 40. Saw the lower body explosiveness as well with a 41.5-inch vertical leap. And despite only being 6'2 and 238, he does set a mean edge against the run. Attacking blockers with violent hands, can stack and shed, uses that lateral agility and pursuit skills to chase down ball carriers. I think of that. You look at the 12 sacks and you're like, I'm kind of underwhelmed by that. I think a lot of people said the same thing about Trayvon Walker. But that's one of the things that's unique about Kirby Smart's offense is he's got some guys that can be edge rushers at the next level and get after the quarterback that really were primarily stopping the run. And when you look at Smith, he was on his way to a breakout season with 7 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and then he tears that pec against Florida on October 29th. So he was really building his way forward, right? And the polished run defender, usually you get a lot of edge rushers who really struggle against the run, and they're more situational guys. Smith is a guy that can do a little bit of everything. You love the bend. You love his ability to flatten out in a hurry, get to the quarterback, chase him down. He's really just a lot of fun to watch. And so I look at him. I think the Eagles, he and Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat, that would be tons of fun to watch there. Obviously, he can learn from Brandon Graham as well, but I think high character guys, that's really what Howie Roseman's looking for. He loves guys coming out of Georgia as well. We saw that with Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean last year. So I think Nolan Smith is going to be the next guy in that group. And then finally, we got to talk about Myles Murphy there out of Clemson, the last guy that I think out of the edge rush group that's actually going to come off the board in round number 1. I've had Myles really coming off the board in a lot of different spots. At one point, I had him coming off the board at number 8 to the Falcons, number 10 to the Eagles, number 15 to the Packers. All could still happen. When you look at his measurables, he looks a lot like Rashawn Gary, but the thing with him is the motor runs hot and cold. When he's on, when he flips the switch and he's on, the guy is relentless. He gets after the quarterback, and you see his ability to attack the edge, be able to set guys up, cross the face of the offensive lineman, get into the backfield with an inside rush. You love the hand work. You love the ability to flip the hips in a hurry. Dude ran a 4.5 140 at the combine. The athleticism is just off the charts. 6'5", 268, being able to run a 4.51. Are you freaking kidding me? The bend is there, but then he disappears. And then when that switch is not on, you don't get that same relentlessness. And that's where I kind of look at the difference between him and Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith is going to give you high energy all the time. I just don't always see that with Myles Murphy, and that's the part that concerns me a little bit. I actually have him coming off the board 24 overall right now to the Jaguars. And I think he could very well go a lot higher. I was having a hard time penciling him in because Texans, I think, may end up taking a quarterback at 12. And then the Packers sitting there at 15 may very well go with the tight end. I'm looking at the Bucs at 19. They could use an edge rusher. I think they go offensive tackle. But the Jaguars, they're an interesting case because you've got Trayvon Walker, you've got Josh Allen. You're expecting the pass rush to get better, and Doug Peterson even came out and said during the NFL meetings in Arizona that the pass rush has to get better. And what's going to happen? You're expecting it from these two guys. You'll lose Arden Key. DeJuan Smoot's likely on his way out as well. I think that would be a great fit. And look, this is a guy, the athleticism is absolutely ridiculous. You just want to see him really unleash that on every single down. And if that happens, then you could have really a scary edge rusher coming off there, a guy that I think could play in a multitude of positions as well. Very versatile, I think, with that body type and the athleticism. But he's a guy that I think could fall just because you're not sure exactly what you're getting with him in terms of, is he a guy that can play consistently, play in and play out. So those are the guys that I have coming off the board in round number 1. After that, there's this second tier of guys, and I swear there could be like 8 edge rushers that come off the board in round number 2. I just feel like there are going to be a couple of guys left out, and trying to figure out who that's going to be has proven really to be difficult. I look at Will McDonald IV out of Iowa State. He has a great chance of being the first guy in this group. 6'4", 239 pounds, Iowa State sack leader all time. A dude that just has an ability to get after the quarterback. 34 sacks in his career. Really, 2020, 2021 had double-digit sacks. This past season didn't put up with quite the same emphasis there. Just 7.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. But look, he also has 10 forced fumbles, 7 pass breakups. This is a guy that is he knows what to do when he gets off the edge, knows how to flatten out and get to the quarterback. You love the hand usage as well. I think the bend is really what you see. His ability to bend, get underneath the pad level of that offensive lineman, be able to turn the corner, flip those hips, and get after the quarterback in a hurry. You see the slap and rip. You see the swim moves. And I'm looking at my notes, and I've got, he's drawing holds with his ability to bend, able to attack the inside a little bit, and then he'll get back outside, 2-hand swipe. Really, he juked out Steve Avila when Iowa State played TCU, and then a speed rush up the field against Anton Harrison, caught him flat-footed, was able to work back to the quarterback with a big hit that forced a fumble in the end zone. That was his 11th sack. Really an excellent speed rush and a counter move coming from him. So when you look at that, that's against a couple of guys that are going to be, in the case of Harrison, could be a first rounder, likely coming off the board in second round. I think Steve Avila is another, guy that's coming off the board in round number 2. And Will McDonald had a field day with the two of them with some big plays. And so that's where I think he's a guy that has the ability to come off the board very, very early in round number 2. Then you've got Adebawore out of Northwestern, 6'2", 282 pounds. This was a guy that I think everyone talked about being physical at the point of attack. We knew that there was that physicality to his game. Look, he put up 225 27 times, so we know this dude is absolutely strong. And there was no question that this was a guy that could stack and shed, a guy that could hold the point, violent hands, drives guys off the ball. I don't think anybody really expected to see him run that 4.49 40 at the combine. 24 tackles for loss, 12.5 sacks in his 4 years at Northwestern. Production didn't quite match the athletic profile, but this is a guy that has the rare blend of size, speed, and power to be a better pro. He's a guy that I think could potentially even kick inside on obvious passing downs. I think Kansas City, if they decide to go edge rusher in round number 1, number 31 overall, I think Adebawore could end up coming off the board there. If the Chiefs end up going with a D tackle in round 1, I think it would behoove them to consider trading up in round 2 to get Adebawore. I think people have him potentially coming off the board in the teens or 20s in the draft, and it's just one of those things to where I don't know that might be a little rich for me. I think at the tail end of round 1, get him in round number 2. I look at the Chiefs. I think that's really a nice fit for him. Both he and Mozzie Smith, who we'll talk about with the defensive tackles. I just think that those are really nice fits. I've got him coming off the board. If you were to go to my mock draft, when I release it, you're going to say, oh, well, you've got Adebawore coming off the board, number 63 overall. Well, I think he's coming off the board in round 2 to the Chiefs. I just don't think it's 63. I think KC trades up and gets him, and that's really what I'm trying to do with my mock draft, is try to really figure out what team is ultimately going to be selecting these guys, not necessarily where they're going to be coming off the board. And so that's really, because obviously after you get past day 1, you're going to see a lot of that fluctuation, right? Number 3 on my list there in round number 2 is Felix Anudike-Uzomah. K-State, 6'3", 255. This is another guy that has a chance to come off the board in round 1. I mean, that's the thing, obviously, with the second tier. Any of these guys that we're talking about could all come off the board in round 1, which is absolutely crazy. Anudike-Uzomah, I think he's still developing as a run defender. Exceptional pass rush specialist, 20.5 sacks in 3 seasons at K-State. Excellent burst off the ball, uses a wide array of pass rush moves to get to the quarterback in a hurry. Heavy-handed, plays with a non-stop motor. Really a guy that I thought was fun to watch just because of his playmaking ability. And look, when you look at K-State, you don't think of them as a pass rush factory, but they've brought together quite a few guys that can make some noise coming off the edge. And I think he may be the best of the bunch that we've seen coming out of that program. Like I said, can be very physical with his hands, the speed to power, getting into the backfield. He can set the edge, uses those hands to stack and shed and get to the outside to drop the running back. You saw that in the Big 12 championship, getting outside on Kendre Miller. But I think really his forte right now is that pass rush ability. If he does fall to round 2, I think the Lions, I think you pair him up with Aiden Hutchinson and gets a team with James Houston IV. I think that would really be a scary pass rush there for the Lions. That to me would be a lot of fun to watch. Keion White, Georgia Tech, another guy that people are talking about in round 1, 6'5", 285, really long arms, 34-inch arms. I think that's the first thing that kind of jumps out to you when you see him. Started his career at Old Dominion, transferred to Georgia Tech, and 14 tackles for loss, 7 sacks for the Yellow Jackets. Also third on the team in tackles with 54. Really a tremendous athlete. I think he's raw as a pass rusher, but freaky twitchiness, hustle to bend the edge, chase down quarterbacks. Speed to power is also evident. Violent punch at the point of attack, driving offensive tackles back and collapsing the pocket from the edge. Versatility also allows him to kick inside, provide an interior rush on obvious passing downs. Can even cover running backs out of the backfield in the passing game, showing that he can even run stride for stride with running backs on wheel routes. I look at the Rams, and they're sitting there at 36. And, if Will Anderson, is another guy that I think the Rams would consider. They're at 36 overall. But with Keion White, he gives them a little bit of flexibility, a guy that could play end for them, could then bounce outside. If you want to get multiple, get a little crazy there, then Keion White's going to give you a lot of that opportunity to do that. Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC. This was a guy, at first I was thinking maybe he was kind of like Cameron Jordan. They were talking about 6'4" and 290 pounds. You saw some of the explosiveness, the power in his hands, not overly bendy. But then he shows up at the combine. He weighs in or he measures in at 6'3" and 266 pounds with 32 and a quarter inch arms. And you're like, well, this is not what USC was selling there. But that said, Tuli Tuipulotu is a guy that he knows how to get after the quarterback. I think that's evident. The power in his hands. If you watch that combine and the way that he just slapped the heck out of that pad, the guy that was holding the bag needs to go into concussion protocol because of the way, just how hard he hit that bag. That was absolutely ridiculous watching that. But he lined up all over the field for DC. Alex Grinch there for USC. Played with his hand in the dirt, 5 technique, or in at the 4-eye. Also kind of as a stand-up, wide 9 technique, or roaming around the middle of the field, shooting those A-gaps as an interior rusher. Very advanced, like I said, with his hands, attacking the offensive tackle in a variety of ways with those hands. Can jolt the blocker with those powerful hands. He attacks the outside, can bend just a little, relentless once he flattens out. You love the versatility. I look at the Chargers And here's kind of what I'm thinking here with LA. Obviously, this is a guy that's in their backyard that they'd love to be able to keep him in town. But when you look at him, obviously he comes off the edge and would be a nice depth piece there with both Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. But the other thing that's interesting is you look at that defensive end, Morgan Fox, 6'3", 275. If Tuli Tuipulotu puts on another 10 pounds and still has that same explosiveness, this is a guy that gives them some additional options. You can still put him on the field there at defensive end. So the versatility is another thing that you have to really appreciate there with Tuipulotu. Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame, 6'5", 264. Dude ran a 4.58 40 at the combine and 1.66 10-yard split. When you think of Isaiah Foskey, I think the first thing that you have to think of is, my goodness, this dude loves the long arm, right? I mean, he uses that patented long arm, the speed to power, really shortening that softening the edge there. Good range and space as well. Does struggle with his bend at times, which could limit his effectiveness coming off the edge, but he does a good job slipping blocks, hitting the gaps downhill. Tremendously productive, hitting double-digit sacks in each of his final 2 seasons there with the Golden Domers. I look at the Bears. They need a presence there on the edge. I think Isaiah Foskey would be a nice fit there. 2 other guys worth mentioning that could come off the board in round number 2. Really process of elimination as I was looking at this. These were the guys that I have falling. BJ Ojulari, they're out of LSU, 6'2", 248 pounds. Really the biggest thing for him is if you run away from him, this is the guy that's going to chase you down, backside pressure, relentless with that motor. But unfortunately with him, if you run at him, he really struggles to get off blocks and get engulfed at times. But when you look at the ability to dip that inside shoulder, turn the corner in a hurry, bends very well. The relentlessness is also there as a pass rusher. 16.5 sacks. I mentioned that 25.5 tackles for loss. He can be disruptive behind the line of scrimmage, really as that pursuit defender. I look at the Saints, and I know Ojulari is a little undersized, but the Saints, look, they've got the trio of Carl Granderson, Tano Passanio, Peyton Turner, opposite Cam Jordan, now that Marcus Davenport's gone. I mean, good Lord. These are guys that really, they managed just 8 sacks among them. None of them look to be starters. They need to get an edge rusher in there. Any of these guys that I'm listing off could end up coming off the board to the Saints. I think Ojulari will bring a different dynamic than what they currently have on the roster, which isn't a bad thing. Derick Hall is the other guy. They're out of Auburn, 6'3", 254. This is the guy that is intriguing. You see the power in his hands, very violent with those hands. Speed to power, drives him into the backfield. Still needs to refine his pass rush moves as a speed rusher, but nonstop motor working to the quarterback still going to be to his benefit. Ran a 4.55 40, but the 1.59 10-yard split was the 3rd fastest among the edge rushers, so he's quite capable of getting to the edge in a hurry as an edge rusher. Also very physical at the point of attack against the run. Uses that length to leverage, to really anchor, set a really strong edge, and then be able to get off that block and make a play on the football. I look at Derick Hall, and he could come off the board in the 1st or 2nd round. I just looked at some of the other guys and looked at really where the board played out, and I couldn't find a spot for Derick Hall in round number 2. Round 3, though, if I'm the Raiders, you need that defensive end to pair with Max Crosby, see if they can light a fire in Chandler Jones, who only have 4 sacks after signing that 3-year, $51 million deal. Derick Hall could end up being that guy. So I think that's another guy that I could see coming off the board there. Round number 3, surefire 3rd rounders. I'm looking at Zach Harrison out of Ohio State, 6'5", 274, 36.25-inch arms. I mean, this guy loves not only the speed, the power. You see the long arm. He uses that length to his advantage. Wants to try to overpower you and use that length to soften the edge and bend around. Not a huge bender. You don't see the flexibility necessarily in Harrison. This is a guy that I think he really struggled to get things going there at Ohio State until his final year. That's really where he put everything together. You watch the intelligence, right? Against Georgia in the Peach Bowl. Reads the end around to Lab McConkey, the wide receiver. Broderick Jones blocks down. He's able to get up the field in a hurry and drop him for a seven-yard loss. Broderick Jones beats him out of his stance on a pass play. Uses that length, gets into the body of Jones. Really slow to get his hands on him. Uses that strength to bend around the edge. Nearly able to swipe the ball out as well. Quick bursts at times, but again, it's mostly that speed to power that you're going to see more than anything else. But you love his ability as well to take advantage of tackles oversetting against Michigan. Ryan Hayes did just that. Attack that inside shoulder of the left tackle. Use the hands to push to work to the inside. Then got to J.J. McCarthy, hitting his arm as he tried to throw. Forced an incompletion there. Run play goes away from him. Excellent effort to chase him down 1 yard shy of a first down after a gain of 4 there in that same Michigan game. So Zach Harrison, to me, a ton of effort that you're going to get out of him, and you have to love that. If you're a team that's looking for that defensive end, and that's going to be able to make some plays coming off the edge for you. I look at the Broncos. They signed Zach Allen in free agency, but they lost Sean Williams. They had already traded away Bradley Chubb. I look at that rotation. You got Allen, Randy Gregory, Baron Browning, Nick Benito along the front seven. You can put in Harrison. He's got that length. He's got that body type. He could potentially end up being a 5 technique for you. You could also potentially stand him up because he's got similar size to Bradley Chubb. I think he just brings a different dynamic there to Denver. They've got 2 picks there back-to-back in round number 3. I think Zach Harrison can end up being one of those picks. Byron Young out of Tennessee, 6'2", 250, explosive, coming off the edge, 4'4", 340, with 1.62 10-yard split, 38-inch vertical leap, 11-foot broad jump. Yes, lightning quick, very explosive, can get up the field in a hurry. That quick get off is one of the things that I think that's really kind of his calling card, and a guy that just knows how to get after the quarterback. I think that was one of the things that was really evident when you watched him there for the Vols. Uses his hands pretty well. A little undersized, so I think that's where he's probably going to end up playing a 34 outside linebacker. 12.5 sacks in his 2 seasons there at Tennessee. Also had 23.5 tackles for loss, so can make some plays behind the line of scrimmage for you. I think the Titans stay in-house, and they take this guy. Bud Dupree is off to Atlanta. Harold Landry's coming off that ACL tear. They picked up Arden Key, which is really a nice start to add there to that pass rush position. The edge rushers. Rashad Weaver's a guy that I think has shown promise as well, but they need additional help, and that explosiveness, if they don't go edge rusher like Nolan Smith in round number 2, then I think Byron Young at number 72 overall makes a lot of sense for them. Next on my list is going to be Andre Carter out of Army. 6'6.5", 256 pounds. I know that he ran, 4.8, 140, I want to say. When you look at him, you look at his frame, 256 pounds. He's able to add additional weight to that frame. He's going to end up looking like a freaking monster once he gets into an NFL weight room. That's really one of the things that is interesting about him. He's got this incredible length, the ability to burst off the football. He bends pretty well for a guy his size. It's 6'6.5". He understands how to come off the edge. You see the ankle flexion as well, flipping those hips in a hurry. Look, his production, we know it took a hit in 2022, but put on the tape as a junior, set the Army single season sack record with 15.5. I look at it, a couple of teams, but I'm looking at Green Bay. Green Bay, we know that Rashawn Gary tore that ACL in November. He may not be back. He may not be ready. We've already mentioned that J.J. Adebawore is there with Preston Smith. I think you could get Andre Carter, put him in that lineup there, as a 34 outside linebacker, and he can push Adebawore for a starting spot if Gary can't go. And even if Gary is there, then I think this is a guy that's going to really help push those two guys for playing time. And, man, like I said, you put him into the weight room, this guy could end up looking like an absolute beast. You just worry about the athleticism and the flexibility. But if you can maintain that and put on another, 10, 15 pounds, it'll really be interesting to see what type of player you end up getting. Third, fourth round, when we're talking about these ranges, Isaiah McGuire there out of Missouri, 6'4", 268 pounds. The 40 time isn't going to be overly flashy. You're going to look at it and go, well, he ran a 4.76. That's not overly explosive. But when you watch his game film, that's one of the things you really have to tune in and watch. You do see the speed, you see the burst coming off the football, you see his ability to bend. Dips that inside shoulder, the rip move, coming off the edge, you see that. And I just keep looking at my notes. Rip move, rip move, rip move. Splits the double team with a quick arm over, getting to the quarterback there. Quickness coming downhill to chase down the running back. That's another thing that you absolutely see. A guy that was a stand-up rush end, can put his hand in the dirt a little bit as well. I think Isaiah McGuire is a guy that we're going to end up seeing come off the board. Like I said, maybe the end of round number 3, round 4 feels probably the right spot for him, but I think it'll be early on the third day of the draft that we see him come off the board. Dylan Horton out of TCU, 6'4", 257. And when you talk about Dylan Horton, I think he's still raw, but you think about the possibilities, right? You see the length. You see this guy who's absolutely can be very explosive coming off that edge, and a guy that started his career at New Mexico, transferred to TCU prior to the 2020 season, and this past year really was his breakout season. 15 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks. Uses that length to his advantage, and really the breakout was that Michigan game. 4 sacks against Michigan, and I think that really speaks to what you can potentially see out of Horton. You really see that potential come out, right? He was beating Zach Zinter with an inside move, loops around, and really causes some chaos there in the backfield. 3-man rush, able to chase down J.J. McCarthy from the backside, strips him from behind as he's taking him down. That's one of the things. The right tackle, Carson Barnhart in that same game, let him run through his gap to the inside, closes on the quarterback in a hurry, able to get to McCarthy as he's trying to get rid of the football. Dylan Horton has that explosiveness, and you wonder where he was prior to that, obviously, because 10.5 sacks, 4 of them were in one game. So before that, you're talking about 6.5 sacks. Yeah, all right, that's okay. But again, it offers a glimpse into what could be with Dylan Horton, the developmental guy. Round 4 probably feels about right. How about Yaya Diaby out of Louisville? 6'3", 263, ran a 4.51 40 at the combine. I think in terms of the speed, that definitely checks out because he can be very explosive coming off the edge. We saw that quite a bit there with the Cardinals. A guy that uses those arms to his advantage. Really extends him into the tackle, maintaining outside leverage against the run. You really love that. He can be a stand-up rusher for you. Stays at home backside, able to make some plays there, especially on some of the misdirections. But can really use that burst coming off the edge. Uses his hands to his advantage, as I mentioned. But with Yaya, I think he's still developing, but definitely an explosive guy. 9 sacks this past season, 14 tackles for loss. I think 4th round feels about right. I had him penciled in there to Tennessee at one point. Any team that's looking for a guy that could be either, he's kind of a tweener. I think he could be either an outside linebacker in a 34 defense or in a traditional 4-3. He can put his hand in the dirt as well. So gives you some of that scheme flexibility for sure. Thomas Nkum out of Central Michigan, 6'2", 262 pounds, 4.66 40 there at the combine. And with Nkum, this is a dude that just knows how to get after the quarterback. I think that's one of the things that's apparent watching his film there at Central Michigan. 19 tackles for loss, 11.5 sacks. A guy that just seemed to live in opponents' backfields. I think that's one of the things that was really a lot of fun to see when you watch Nkoun play. Is he's all-out effort all the time. Attacking the offensive lineman's hands with a variety of moves. A guy that's going to attack you to the inside. If you watched him against Eastern Michigan, he was just throwing the right tackle aside, taking inside rushes and being able to get after the quarterback. You also saw tremendous effort. Samson Evans busted off for a big run, and there's Nkoun chasing him 42 yards down the field. Ultimately, he was shoved out by the safety, but the effort was impressive. So the sack artist is the guy that's also showing you tremendous effort getting down the field. I thought that was something that was really interesting. Mike Morris out of Michigan, 6'5", 275, the 4.95 40 at the combine. Really, what is he? I think is really the biggest question mark, right? I mean, they were touting him as 293 pounds. He comes in at 275, so I think really what he's looking to be is a 34 outside linebacker, slimmed down a bit, which I think is needed. You want to see more of that explosiveness out of him. Can get those inside pass rushes, uses that length to his advantage, slowed up by some injuries, but I think what you have with Mike Morris is he really put himself on the map this year as a guy that can get after the quarterback. 11 tackles for loss, but 7.5 sacks. And this was a guy that I think really started the year strong, right? Had a stretch there in the middle of the season where he was really getting after the quarterback. He had sacks in 5 of 6 games, 2 against Iowa, but finished the last 3 games without a single sack. That was against Nebraska, Ohio State, and then TCU. Just had two tackles there against the Horned Frogs in that game. Just one in against Nebraska, one against the Buckeyes. Really kind of disappeared a little bit. So obviously that can be concerning, a guy that's just going to disappear from games. But again, a guy that I think he's still pretty raw, developmental type, but a guy that I can see coming off the board in round 4. To me, both he and Dylan Horton are guys that could be round 4, round 5. But the athleticism, the traits are absolutely there. The length are things you have to get excited about. In round number 5, I'm looking at KJ Henry out of Clemson, 6'4", 251, 4.63 40 at the combine. A guy that, he loves to attack the inside. Inside moves were something that I noticed out of KJ Henry quite a bit. A guy that really loves to get after the quarterback. Pretty productive player. 28 tackles for loss, 13 sacks. A guy that's going to really play the run very well. 5th round feels about right because he's, I think, further along as a run defender than he is as a pass rusher. Nick Herbig out of Wisconsin, 6'2", 240, really short arms, 31.25-inch arms, ran a 4.65 there at the combine though, 240 pounds. He was playing around 225, 230, so he was able to bulk up, and so that really boded well for him. But I ultimately think 5th round feels about right. I think he's going to have to end up playing off-ball linebacker when it's all said and done. But look, all it was production there at Wisconsin. 36 tackles for loss, 21 sacks, including 11 this past season. When you think about linebackers coming out of Wisconsin, edge rushers, obviously you think of guys like Zach Bond or Vince Beagle. Joe Schobert was a middle linebacker, but the production was absolutely there. If you want to get into just linebackers, period, Chris Borland, Chris Orr, Jack Sanborn, guys that are just really good football players, very well coached, and Herbig is no exception there. Tavius Robinson out of Mississippi, 6'6", 257, tremendous size, runs a 4.66 40. This is another guy that I think when you talk about development, a guy that I think can only continue to get better, and it's one of those things to bear. Depending on where he goes, this is a guy that has the potential to really explode at the next level. 13 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks, got better and better each and every year there with the Rebels, including 6 sacks this past season. He's one of those guys to keep an eye out for. 5th, 6th round, but a guy a developmental piece that you're really going to be happy with. A guy that I think will get into that rotation and eventually, into a starting spot. How about Habakkuk Baldonado there out of Pittsburgh, 6'4", 251. Look, 4.78 40 there at the combine. This guy though, he's really raw, right? Italian kid, played football in Italy before finally coming over to the States. And when you watch him play there at Pittsburgh, 2021 was really the big year for him, right? 12 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 41 tackles from the defensive end position. 2022, really kind of a down year. Only played in 9 games, just 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. A raw player, a guy that I think is athletic, plays with good power as well, but he just needs time to develop. That's really the biggest thing more than anything else. So 5th, 6th round feels probably about right for Baldonado. With Ali Gay out of LSU, he's 6'6", 263, 34.25-inch arm, so the length is something that really jumps out. A guy that knows how to get his hands up in the passing lane, but a guy that I don't think he's overly explosive. The production just isn't there. Just 7 sacks in 3 seasons there with the Tigers. I know just played in 4 games there in 2021, but you wanted to see a little bit more out of him. He just left you wanting more, and that's obviously the biggest concern. A guy that I think can play well against the run. But Ali Gay, 5th, 6th round, all these guys with a ton of length, but the production are some of the things that really kind of scare you a little bit. Then you get to a guy like Nick Hampton out of Appalachian State. He's 6'2", 236, an undersized guy, runs that 4.58 40. I honestly thought he was going to run a little bit faster time because when you watch him play the play speed, he plays much faster than even that 4.58 40, which isn't bad for a linebacker, but again, I thought he was going to run a little bit faster. 40 tackles for loss, 26.5 sacks, 4 pass breakups, 6 forced fumbles in his career there with the Mountaineers there out of App State. And look, 2021, again, was a huge year for him. 17.5 tackles for loss, 11 sacks. You love the explosiveness. You love his ability to just bend the edge and come off. He's going to be a 34 outside linebacker. I think there's no question about that. But when I look at his game, I think 5th round probably feels about right. I think that's where we should probably pencil him in. He actually has a decent bull rush. That speed to power, able to drive some guys back, but I think the biggest thing for him is being able to get off blocks. It's one thing to sit there and put 2 hands into the chest and drive a guy back with a good bull rush. That may affect the quarterback, may end up getting him outside the pocket, but then, you want him to be able to finish as well. And if he can't get off the block, that's going to be an issue. I think, shedding blocks, getting engulfed, those are going to be issues that you're going to see with Nick Hampton. DJ Johnson there out of Oregon, 6'4", 260 pounds. Surprisingly ran a 4.59 40. 159, 10-yard split. I was not expecting him to be as fast as he was. But with DJ Johnson, this is a guy that played a bunch of different positions. He was defensive end, was a linebacker, played at tight end. This past season, 8.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. A guy who I think is pretty fun to watch, really, because of that versatility. In 2020, at that tight end position, 10 receptions, 113 yards, 3 touchdowns. Just had a nose for the end zone. But a guy that I think really the future is going to be as that edge rusher, 5th, 6th round, developmental type, still learning that position. But I think there's some potential there for him. Now, Jose Ramirez out of Eastern Michigan, right? 6'2", 242 pounds, runs a 4.73 40, which wasn't overly explosive, but then he pulls out this 6.95 3-cone drill, showing the ability to really bend, and runs a 4.3 short shuttle, which was the fastest of all the guys there at the combine. And look, when you talk about his production, there's some guys there at Eastern Michigan that Patrick O'Connor has played in the league, but obviously the guy that everyone wants to talk about is Max Crosby, and Jose Ramirez has more sacks than any of them. 20.5 sacks, including 12 this past season, 19.5 tackles for loss, 33 total tackles for loss in his career, 7 pass breakups, 5 forced fumbles. And look, at EMU, he's not going to get the hype. I mean, I think that's what happened with Max Crosby. He fell all the way to round number 4. So I think with Jose Ramirez, when I look at him, he's got a really, really slight lower body, pretty skinny lower frame. So that's another thing that I think teams are going to be scared of a little bit, in terms of, hey, we got to put some more weight on this kid. But man, when he was lining up at the wide 9 as a speed rusher, was countering underneath, but you saw the quick slap and a rip, dip in the inside shoulder, bending, turning the corner, getting to the quarterback in a hurry. The speed rush, ability to bend, ability to change directions. And that's really what shows up there. Like that 3-cone drill and the short shuttle. Look, he's not going to be asked to run a 40, that 4.73. The short bursts are really what his calling card are. The calling card is going to be there at the next level. A guy that did a good job also against the run, able to get up the field in a hurry and affect the run. Force guys back to the inside, not necessarily setting the edge against the defensive end, but a guy that was able to beat his man off the ball, get penetration, and really disrupt the run play. So I think Jose Ramirez is a guy that is really intriguing for me. 6th round feels about right. Maybe he can come off the board in round number 5, but again, he's a dude that's really a lot of fun to watch. I look at Caleb Murphy out of Ferris State, 6'3", 254, ran a 4.8, 140. Nothing to really write home about. But when you look at what he did at Ferris State after transferring from Grand Valley State, it's very impressive. Didn't play in 2020 because obviously the season was canceled. But as a junior, 14.5 sacks, 21.5 tackles for loss. But as a senior, out of Ferris State, he was given the 2022 Ted Hendricks Award, which is given to the top defensive end. Why? Well, the dude had 93 tackles, 25.5 sacks, 39 tackles for loss. I mean, just video game type numbers coming off the edge. Now, obviously playing at Ferris State, the athleticism, he was the man among boys, and he didn't really have to worry about technique so much. So that the rawness to his game, you look at the 6th, 7th round potentially. But look, John Kaminsky coming out of Charleston, I think that really, he came off the board in round 4. So when I look at Murphy, I think anywhere between 4th and 6th round, it just really depends on which team gets excited for him. We know the Lions were excited about Kaminsky, and we see what Kaminsky's been able to do. He's re-signed with them after 4 sacks this past season. Shoot, I could see Caleb Murphy coming off the board in round number 4. I really could. Play speed is much faster than that 40 time. He's a guy to keep an eye out for, that's for sure. In round number 6, towards the end of the 6th round, potentially, possibly even into round number 7, O'Shawn Mathis out of Nebraska, 6'5", 250, 35.25-inch arms, really long arms, 4'7", 440. I think the biggest thing with O'Shawn Mathis is, he never really lived up to that potential, right? At TCU in 2020, 12.5 tackles for loss and 8 sacks. And then the final 2 seasons, 2021 at TCU, transferred to Nebraska, 9 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Really didn't, did he peak in 2020? Obviously, that's going to be a concern as you're looking at things. He's one of those guys that's kind of a mystery. He could very easily not get drafted because there's just some question marks to his game, but you love the length, so that's why I think there's a chance that we do see him get drafted late. Round 7, I think that's really where Viliami Fehoko out of San Jose State is going to come off the board. 6'4", 276 pounds, the reigning Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. And when you watch Fehoko play, he's just a guy that's really a lot of fun to watch because there's a lot of power in his hands, the motor. He plays with his hair on fire. And look, 47 tackles for loss, 23 sacks, also 5 forced fumbles in his career. And with Fehoko, I think you see some of the explosiveness as well. Power in his hands coming off the edge. He'll start the rush to the outside, doesn't stay blocked, watches the quarterback stepping up in the pocket, loops back around to the inside to get after the quarterback. Really a nice push-pull to get around the corner, can bend a little bit. You see some ankle flexion to him, can disrupt the run at the line of scrimmage, cutting down the running backs there. Pretty twitchy athlete, and a guy, I look at him coming out of San Jose State. I think 6th round is probably the ceiling there, more likely the 7th round. But look, he's been a lot of fun to watch. I think he's a guy that could stick on an NFL roster. Tyler Lacey out of Oklahoma State, 6'4", 279. Obviously the 5'1", 140, not nearly as fast as he would have liked. This is a guy that I think is predominantly a run defender, a guy that can take on multiple blockers. Really, he's a guy that can kick inside to defensive tackle. I think his best year was 2021, 11.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. Has 11.5 sacks in his career, but 30 tackles for loss. Like I said, there's power in his hands to drive his guys back. He can hold the point of attack. A guy that can shed blocks, get into the backfield, make plays behind the line of scrimmage. That's really what Tyler Lacey's game is going to be. Isaiah Land out of Florida A&M, 6'3", 236, 4'6", 240 at the combine. This is a dude that is very explosive. He's going to be a 34 outside linebacker, come off the edge. And look, at FAMU, 2021 was really a banner year for him. Buck Buchanan Award winner to the National Defensive Player of the Year, had 19 sacks to lead the FCS, 25.5 tackles for loss. Very explosive coming off the edge. Dude had 5 sacks against South Carolina State, which was a FAMU single game record. Recorded 1.5 sacks in 6 games, 2 in 5 games, 3 in 3 games. In that season, a guy who, again, he's going to be incredibly explosive. He's definitely a linebacker coming off the edge, but a guy that definitely knows how to get after the quarterback. In 2022, 7.5 sacks to his credit, to go along with 11.5 tackles for loss. I think teams really tried to key in on him, but you love the explosiveness. I think there's still some development that needs to be made. He's kind of undersized, if you will, as an edge rusher, 6'3", 236. But again, a guy that I'm pulling for. I think he could very well end up sticking here. You look at James Houston IV, what he was able to do. I think this guy could be a similar prospect. Speaking of guys coming from smaller schools, B.J. Thompson out of Stephen F. Austin, 6'6", 238 pounds. This guy who has tremendous length and a guy that can really bend coming off the edge. I think when you look at him, a guy, I want to say that he had 18 sacks in his career. Really, not only is he explosive coming off the edge, but he has a really nice spin move. We saw that time and time again there at the East-West Shrine Bowl in the one-on-one matchups. I was able to get my hands on some of the videos, and that's really one of the things that you saw with BJ. A guy that I think could come off the board in round 6. Round 7 probably feels about right, though. Same goes for Lonnie Phelps out of Kansas. 6'2", 244 pounds, runs a 4.5, 540 at the combine. And with Lonnie Phelps, again, he's going to be a work in progress. He's a guy that's going to be a developmental player, but definitely has some traits that teams are going to be looking for. I thought he was going to actually come back to Kansas, decided to come out. A guy that can play with his hand in the dirt and also come off the edge as a 3-4 outside linebacker. I think his lack of overall size will end up having him come off the edge, standing up, being able to play in space. 2 other guys, I don't know that they're going to get drafted. Robert Beal Jr. out of Georgia, we know the athleticism is there. He's 6'4", 247, 4'4", 840, but still very raw. Still a guy that I think is continuing his development. I look at his gameplay, and he's just not there yet. 11.5 tackles for loss, 10 sacks in his career. 6.5 of those came in 2021. This past season, just didn't see him take that next step, that next level jump. A guy that saw a lot of action. We just didn't see him closing the deal. You wanted to see number 33 there for the Georgia Bulldogs making plays, and you just didn't see enough of that out of him. So that's really a concern. But the athleticism, the traits, could end up getting himself drafted late. And then M.J. Anderson out of Iowa State. I think you see the physicality that's apparent. 6'2", 269 pounds. Definitely a guy that is heavy-handed. Obviously, when you look at Iowa State, everyone was talking about Will McDonald. People weren't thinking about M.J. Anderson, but a guy that he started his career there at Minnesota, came to the Cyclones in 2022, 9 tackles for loss, just 3.5 sacks, but a guy that I think known more so for playing the run. And so, like Tyler Lacey, these are guys that I think could get drafted in round 7. They also may not hear their name called. I think that's really where we're at with those guys. 2 other guys to mention. Brenton Cox Jr. out of Florida. He was let go by Florida. Off-field issues. Is he going to get drafted or not because of that? 6'4", 250. Ran a 4.8, 240 at the combine. You're expecting a little bit more explosiveness out of him. I love the hands. I thought very violent hands, able to come off his blocks and make some plays behind the line of scrimmage, be disruptive behind the line. I just wonder if the character issues are really going to turn teams off. I think that's really something that teams are going to have to keep an eye out for. Ikenna and Ikechukwu, they're out of Rice, 6'4", 264. Another guy that has tremendous length. Another guy who's also going to be very raw. And so that's really the biggest thing that you're going to be talking with him is, do you want to use a draft pick on this kid as a developmental piece, or do you want to bring him in as a priority free agent? 23 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks in his career there with the Owls. I think the athleticism is intriguing, but I don't know that I'm necessarily going to even use a 7th round pick on him. I just don't know that I'm there. Tyree Wilson out of Mississippi State, he's 6'2", 263 pounds, ran a 4.65 40. This was a guy that, again, another guy that I think is going to be an undrafted free agent, priority free agent when it's all said and done. But a guy that, 25.5 tackles for loss, 17 sacks, was pretty consistent, one of the leaders there for the Bulldogs. I just, you look at the athletic profile, and I just think there are guys that are better coming off the edge than Tyree Wilson is. So he's another guy that I think will end up being a priority free agent when it's all said and done. Some people have him coming off the board 6th, 7th round. I just don't know that I'm there yet with him. So in terms of the guys that I know or feel comfortable from an edge perspective that are likely to get drafted, we're talking about all in. Let's see. You're talking probably right around 30 to 35 edge rushers coming off the board in this year's draft. That it's very deep. We know this. When I look at just how many guys can come off the board in the first 2 days of the draft, if we include Isaiah McGuire, who I think is that tweener, 3rd, 4th round, you're talking about 17 edge rushers that could very well hear their names called in the first 2 days of the draft. I mean, that's insane. And obviously you started off with as many as 5 for sure, but then that second group you could see 1, maybe even 2 guys come off the board there at the end of round number 1. I've got as many as could you really see 8 come off the board in round 3? I don't think so. I think there are going to be a couple of those guys that end up getting left out that fall to round number 3, and teams are going to be really happy with the draft value that they get with these guys there in the 3rd round. It's just you've got a little bit of everything with this group, right? You've got the guys that are explosive coming off the edge, guys that use their hands very well. You see the power, the speed to power with a lot of them, the length for days. Guys that are very adept at setting the edge against the run. You've got guys that are backside, great at backside pursuit. Guys that can be multiple. Guys, they started taking these edge rushers and they started moving them around all over the field to where they're even shooting through the A gap as a stand-up rush linebacker. The versatility with this group is very, very intriguing. I think you've got a lot of guys here that have a ton of potential at the next level, could be starters, could be stars when it's all said and done. And really I think you have that potential in all 3 days of the draft. It's going to be fun to see where these guys go. The situations, I think some of these guys have a chance to start right away or make an impact right away. It really just depends on the situation, where they come in, how they're going to be used, the coaches that are going to be in there. Like I said, I think Lukas Van Nes and Ryan Nielsen, that's a match made in heaven. You let Ryan Nielsen develop this kid, he could turn into an absolute monster. So the right situation with these guys, I think, makes a ton of sense. Will Anderson Jr., to me, elite pass rusher. If I'm DeMeco Ryans, if I have any hesitance with these quarterbacks, if Bryce Young is number 1 overall, then go with your gut, go with your edge rusher. You had that success with Nick Bosa when you were a linebacker with the Houston Texans yourself. You had J.J. Watt coming off the edge there for you as well. Get your guy, get your edge rusher, get Will Anderson Jr., and then worry about that quarterback position. If I'm Nick Caserio, then you start working the phones, try to get back into the top 10 to get one of those quarterbacks, or potentially stay put and get one of those quarterbacks who happens to slide down in the draft. We see it every single year. We thought Justin Fields was going to be a bona fide top 10 pick. He slides to number 11 to the Bears. Houston sitting there at number 12. Could we see a Will Levis slide to number 12? If Houston's satisfied with Will Levis, not at number 2, but at number 12, then hey, that could make some sense. So it's really going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, the intrigue really starts there at the number 2 overall pick if Bryce Young goes number 1 overall. And I think that's really the expectation at this point, is that they'll pull the trigger with Bryce Young and see where things go from there. And if, on the off chance, David Tepper and company look at Anthony Richardson and say, you know what, Anthony Richardson can be the next Cam Newton in this organization, then there's a chance that Bryce Young goes number 2 overall, which then means Will Anderson goes 3 to the Cardinals. And then you've got Tyree Wilson. Does he go to Seattle? Or is that where Jalen Carter goes? Does he go to the Lions? Or is that where Devin Witherspoon goes? Does he go to the Raiders? Or is that where Christian Gonzalez goes? Because we know the Raiders don't have a number 1 corner. And then the Falcons. Tyree Wilson being coached up by Ryan Nielsen could be a scary thing. The question then is going to be, where does Lukas Van Nes go? If I'm Houston, if I am D'Amico Ryans, I look at Lukas Van Nes and say, this guy could be my J.J. Watt. I may need to trade up to get him. If the Bears are sitting there at 9 and the Bears want to trade down, man, after Atlanta picks, I get on the phone with Ryan Poles. I try to get up there to number 9 and get Lukas Van Nes. So let's go ahead and wrap up this podcast. Next one here in the next day or so is going to be on the defensive tackles. Obviously, we know Jalen Carter is really the prize of that position group. But then after that, you've got 3 other guys. Where do they come off the board? Are they round 1? Are they round 2? Kalijah Cansey, the undersized, explosive defensive tackle. You've got Brian Bresee. When he's healthy, this is a guy that can get up the field, make some plays, can be very strong at the point of attack as well. And then you've got Mozzie Smith out of Michigan, a guy that is tremendously physical and strong at the point of attack, but a guy that also shows off some surprising athleticism for a guy his size. Those are the 4 guys that I'm really looking forward to talking about here, because obviously they all have the potential to come off the board on day 1. If any of them slide to day 2, then a team is getting an absolute steal, in my opinion. I think there may be a couple of those guys sliding to day 2. But really, then the next question is what do we have in terms of depth? That's what I want to explore. And that's really what we're going to talk through, is just how many guys are going to come off the board on the first 2 days of the draft. How many guys are going to hear their names called on day 3? We'll get into that here in the next day or so. Until next time, for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your week. Countdown to the draft is on, and until next time, I am out of here.